All-you-can-eat buffet employees of Reddit, what is the most heinous culinary crime you've seen patrons commit? I used to work at my school's all-you-can-eat cafeteria. One day, a visiting football team from a rival school came in for lunch. One of the players, a big guy, walked over to the fruit table and loaded up his plate with watermelon. Then he headed to the condiments and slathered the whole thing in mayonnaise. I watched, half amazed and half horrified, as he ate what looked like half a watermelon and half a jar of mayo in one sitting. It was honestly one of the most bizarre and impressive things I've ever seen. Story 2. I was a cook, sous chef for 17 years. My last job was a popular Austrian area in the Alps. We had a lunch buffet every afternoon, more like an afternoon snack. 3 different mains, 3 different sides, and a collection of salads and veggies and some cake. Once a week it had a theme, and usually I would have to stand at the buffet and make either fresh waffles or fresh Austrian pancakes. I had a huge setup with tons of toppings and ice cream at one end. I was in the middle, and at the other end was the stuff I needed to make waffles, pancakes, like a container with the batter. Everything had a description. Everything. Even my batter. You'd wonder why I put a sign to let the people know that it was the batter. People would watch me, pour the batter in the pan, machine, and then they would grab the ladle and pour some of the batter over their food. I was completely baffled the first time. I couldn't understand. I even told the people that it was the batter, and they would not stop. I even put lids on everything and other stuff. I would grab the ladle out of their hands. It did not stop them. They all told me that I have no idea what I was talking about and that this was vanilla sauce. I kept pointing them to the vanilla sauce at the other end. They did not care. The weirdest thing is, all of them did not have dessert on their plates. It was a main dish like casserole, ham, salads, paella, lasagna, and whatever was on the buffet, and they poured what they thought was vanilla sauce over to make it more weird. All of them ate it. Their plates were all empty. I had to notify the director, as the batter not only had raw flour but also raw eggs in it. I did not want to be responsible, and my director did not believe me. So one afternoon, he sat behind the bar and watched it all happen and was confused too. We had to stop doing fresh waffles and pancakes. Story 3. I worked at a breakfast buffet, and every Sunday, these 2 tow truck drivers came in and would absolutely clean us out to the point that after several months, they suggested we charge them more than normal patrons. Story 4. The buffet limited each guest to 1 plate at a time, but you could return to the buffet table to get a new plate and more food. A guest apparently didn't understand the process, stacked the plate high with an entire meal, appetizers, mains, salads, and on the precarious pile, added cake, soft-serve ice cream, and poured chocolate syrup onto the whole pile. The staff watched in amazement as she gingerly walked back to her table, not spilling anything, and sat down with her friends. The friends apparently explained the 1 plate at a time deal, but to her credit, she shrugged her shoulders and ate all the food without complaining, and even went back for a second serving a cake and ice cream. Story 5. While working on an ambulance, we responded to a 911 call at a Chinese buffet. A diner ate so much food, he couldn't move. He called 911 because of the severe abdominal pain. Story 6 was at a Chinese buffet when the servers started running around. They went to each table and told them that if people wanted more food, they should get it now and within the next 5 minutes or so. Within 10 minutes, 2 buses full of mainland Chinese tourists came in like a swarm of locusts. It was just like you see in those videos of people fighting over trays. We were pretty much done but stayed for the chaos and free entertainment. They were screaming at employees to bring more. Workers couldn't even put the shrimp and other seafood trays in the buffet before being surrounded and having food grabbed. One guy took a whole tray of chicken wings to his table. We didn't stay too long, but the restaurant was like a war zone with stuff all over the floors. I've traveled extensively, and everywhere I've gone, it's the mainland Chinese tourists who are the rudest people. Story 7. I worked on a cruise ship. One midnight buffet was chocolate-themed. Everything was chocolate. A passenger took a tray and filled it, including a whole 8-inch chocolate cake. He then placed upturned glasses at each corner of his tray and added a second tray, then a third. He eventually sat with 3 full trays of food. I saw him pick up whole cakes as if they were sandwiches. I returned an hour or so later and he was in the line for another run. His table had the detritus of his previous binge. Story 8. Years ago, we were standing in line at a buffet on a cruise, and there was an old man, probably in his 90s, about 3 ppl ahead of us. He picked up the serving spoon of some rice concoction and took a bite right off the spoon. About that time, a middle-aged woman walked up, grabbed the spoon from him, and said, "Dad, no, you can't do that." She turned to a floor attendant, handed her the spoon, and told her what happened and asked her to please get another spoon. I'm not sure the attendant spoke English because she stood there holding the spoon, looking confused after the lady walked away and then just stuck the spoon back in the rice. We all groaned loudly in disgust, protested, and have never eaten at a buffet since. Story 9. Not sure if this was a crime or just good financial sense by me. Back in college, early 00s, me and cousin roommate would frequent a Chinese buffet that allowed takeout. You paid for a styrofoam container and then could fill it however you liked. The first time we went, we filled them as you would expect: rice, noodles, stir-fry veggies, and protein. But after we ate, we discussed that no one ever looked in our container after we purchased it. So the next time we went, we just filled those things to the brim with protein. Those suckers felt like they weighed 10 pounds. Then we just cooked the rice or noodles at home. We could 5 meals out of those containers. Rice is cheap, steak and shrimp is not. Story 10. I watched a kid at the ice cream dessert area casually having a conversation with another kid, while his hand was fully in the bowl of sprinkles, doing what I would describe as massaging the sprinkles the entire time. Story 11. Not an employee, but if you've ever been to Golden Corral in Texas, you know they have a melted chocolate fountain for people to put on berries and ice cream and whatnot, and kids stick their mouth right under that fountain sometimes, and that chocolate dribble off their spit-laden cheeks just gets sucked back up to the top and back down through the fountain. Story 12. Not an employee, but I went to a buffet with a buddy of mine that insisted he could pile his plate high, leave half of it uneaten, and go back for another plate, including more of the stuff he'd left behind at the table. I called him on the egregious waste, and he said, "It's unlimited, and I paid for it. Why can't I waste it?" He was also rude to the serving staff and didn't tip at all. That was the last time we went out together, and the friendship fizzled shortly after that. Story 13. In high school, worked at a buffet, and this old man would come and wait patiently for us to refill the fried chicken. He would then take every single piece, usually 15 pieces at a time, eat every bit to a bare bone, and repeat. He would generally eat 3 plates full of fried chicken, nothing else, when he'd come in about 2x per week. If I remember correctly, high record was 52 pieces of chicken. We'd start making double batches, one for him and one for the buffet. I got to where I knew him, and I'd catch his eye and get a thumbs up or down if he was done. Had another dude that used to come and take several pieces of chocolate cake from the bar, place them in a single plate, do soft, serve over the top, and cover it in ketchup as if it was chocolate sauce. Story 14. Golden Corral customer watched a 70-year-old dip his fried chicken in the chocolate fountain. He caught my look of astonishment and said, "You've never tried it? You're missing out." Years later, and I am still missing out. Story 15. I know the question was likely aimed at food combinations, but the standout buffet tragedy for me was the poor folks with bulimia that would eat in the bathroom. They would sneak the little dessert plates in, binge, and purge. We'd find the plates hidden in the little stall trash can meant for used feminine products. Our boss called those trash cans surprise boxes, because you never knew what you'd get when it was your turn to clean the bathroom. Story 16. In Sharm el-Sheikh, nearly 20 years ago, the hotel was full of Russian. We were one of only 3 British couples in a whole massive 5-star hotel. I will never forget it. The first morning, we stood open-mouthed in the restaurant as we watched them. One group pushed a big load of tables together so around 30 of them could sit together. They filled their table with all the trays of food, trays included, whole, baskets of fruit. When they left, a few of the women took plastic carrier bags to the buffet and started filling them with fried eggs, beans, sausages, hash browns, all mushed together in bags. Security guards had to break up at least one fight, and usually 2 or 3 every mealtime. A member of staff came and spoke to us, and upon realizing we were from the UK, ushered us to what was the VIP part, but was basically where they put anyone who was not Russian. The other 2 couples explained that we got real cutlery and plates, etc. in that bit, and the Russians got disposable stuff because they either broke or stole it. We got table service instead of buffet as it was almost impossible to get through them, especially once they knew you weren't Russian. It was quite a spectacle. They actually burst the glass door of the restaurant one night trying to be the first ones in. The chefs had turkeys and beef joints, etc. They were supposed to go up and get some carved onto their plate. They were taking the whole thing. Whole gâteau. We were treated brilliantly by the staff. They referred to the Russians as the pigs. At first, we had reserved tables with security in the bar in the evening because the Russians would get drunk and fight with each other and try to fight with us. One of the couples we met we got on quite well with. The guy was a producer, and lady did music stuff for quite a famous TV program that was on at the time. Fairly respectable people. Me and the guy went to the bar and came back to a group of Russian women trying to attack our wives and literally carry our tables and chairs away. Because they had nowhere to sit, the security had to form a ring around them. We were moved to a private bar after that. It was a very memorable 2 weeks. Over Xmas and New Year, too. Story 17. My grandma owned a small little buffet kind of in the middle of nowhere, in the south, aimed at providing a place for farmers to eat. There was this one guy that came in weekly. Dude looked like a participant on my 600-pound life. He and his wife the first few times got a lot of food, but nothing too extreme. Then they started getting a lot more, to the point we charged them double because we basically had to. Then the last 2 times, they came in and cleared the entire buffet. As soon as we added more food, they'd clear it. I watched them mix everything together to eat it. The guy mixed blackberry cobbler and ducking gravy. It was so nasty. Not only did they eat way too damn much, they'd leave a huge mess behind that my poor teenage self had. After the second time, my grandma banned them. Story 18. I saw a man use his hand instead of the spoon to get ranch dressing on his plate. He then proceeded to lick his hand clean and then go for a second scoop. Golden Corral behavior. It was a golden corral. Story 19. Customer here. I was waiting patiently as the staff at a Chinese buffet refilled some kind of shrimp and veg medley. Then, as soon as they were done, I was forced to watch in awe as a large woman barged in front of me and picked out every single shrimp. Story 20. At the buffet at my college dining hall, I was standing in line grabbing food when the guy next to me pulls out a freezer bag. He fills the whole thing with chicken nuggets from the buffet. He saw me looking at him weird, and he explained what he was doing. Entrance to the dining hall was $8 a head. At the start of the week, he would pay the $8, grab as much food as he could, and take it home. He would then survive off of whatever it was he brought home. I thought he was insane. He said he was saving money. Story 21. I worked as a baker and dessert bar at a Golden Corral in high school. I've seen my share. Kid wiping snot off his nose and then reaching into the container of gummy bears at the ice cream station. He did the same to the candy corn and the chocolate chips. Customer used his tray as his dinner plate. Technically, there was a plate on the tray, but it was buried under a mountain of food. The worst part was you could no longer tell what was food anymore. Just looked like a pile of pig slop. Saw a woman open a foil-wrapped sweet potato and then proceeded to make an ice cream sundae out of it. I had just pulled a tray of brownies from the oven and put them on the line. Guy takes the entire tray and takes it back to his table. He hunched over the tray and ate every brownie while glaring at the people he was with. I've seen wolves eat with less anger. While making cookies, a woman came behind the counter and just grabbed a handful of dough out of my tub. Didn't put it on a plate or a bowl. Just walked back to her table, eating it out of her hand. Non-customer atrocity. The manager kept insisting that baked chicken didn't really need to cook for 1 hour in the oven. 15 minutes was enough time. No one noticed. Story 22. Not an employee, but my own story. First one. Growing up, I never had been to an all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant as they weren't really a thing in my area. Visited family in the South when I was 15, and they were everywhere. Anyway, the family took me to one, and as I was getting stuff on my plate, I noticed most people were making mountains of food on their plates, and many carrying 2 plates at a time. As I wasn't used to the idea of an all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant concept, and based on what I was witnessing, I asked a family member if you could only go up once. They laughed and said you could go back up as many times as you want, which shocked the hell out of me looking at these people. Keep in mind, I was a teenage boy who was always hungry and could eat like a horse, but I was amazed at how much food people were piling on their plates. Each time they went to the buffet and witnessing them going back repeatedly for the same mountain full of food. Second one. I never had a chance to go to a buffet again until 20 years later, and was coming back from the outer banks of NC towards Charlotte with BF on a Sunday morning. And the only thing we could find on the road open was an all-you-can-eat buffet place. The host, waitress, was very nice, but said she could tell we weren't from the area. At first, I thought it was a gay thing, especially when she said for us to hurry up and get our food as the church was about to get out. We sort of laughed it off, but got ready for being stared at for being a couple. But as we were finishing grabbing our servings at the buffet, this mob comes in. I swear, it was like a shark or piranha feeding frenzy. They were pushing each other, being very loud, and basically emptying the stations of food. Both of us just finished our plates and left as quickly as we could, as it was amazing watching these people basically yelling at the staff for the kitchen to bring out more food, and they were standing at the stations just waiting. Story 23. My mom used to work at a casino with a buffet as a sous. She's got some wild stories and some pretty dark ones, too. My favorites. Retired police chief and his wife used to come in with garbage bags and containers and freely fill them with as much food as they could. These two were very well off. They used the husband's previous position in the police force to intimidate workers into letting them use the buffet as their own grocery store. They regularly made a scene in the restaurant, refused to tip or clean up their space, and screamed at workers that they'll use their power with the police union to put the casino buffet out of business. Management finally grew a pair and banned them after they started walking out without paying. There were 2 morbidly obese ladies that would come into the buffet and stuff as much food as they could into their stomachs. They'd eat to the point of vomiting at the table and would continue to eat after getting sick. They also got banned. A gunman came into the place looking for an employee he used to be romantically involved with. The woman had restraining orders against him from prior domestics and stalking. My mom hid in the walk-in with her co-workers and a couple of customers. The dude wound up opening fire and hitting a few people, including the woman he was stalking. She survived with non-fatal injuries. The gunman was later hit while being held in jail. Lots of octogenarians throwing hands with each other for all-you-can-eat crab legs. Lots of drunk people pissing and crapping themselves or walking into the buffet covered in their own waste from extended hours gambling. Most didn't care and would be back out on the floor in 30 minutes after they were told to leave. Story 24. As a customer, was at a Chinese buffet in NJ. A very obese family comes in, finishes before we leave. Our view faced the entrance. We watched as at least 2 members of the family puke in front of the entrance. You literally couldn't enter or leave because there was so much vomit. Felt bad for the workers. Story 25. Not an employee, but my husband was though. One night he came home and told me the story of how he was just standing around after waiting for the next batch of food to be put out. He went up to the front to check to see what needed restock and just casually watched a small child, small enough to be under the plastic guards, proceed to just have a full-on attack and sneeze all over the food he was standing in front of. Picked up a few pieces and put them on his plate and walked away. He told his front line, and they just shrugged and said they don't have enough to replace the food just yet. He quit the next day, and that's why I refused to go to Buffett's ever since. Story 26. Not an employee, but I was at Golden Corral a couple months ago. 7-ish-year-old by himself licked the dressing off his hand from the dipper he used, then grabbed other food. No one said a thing to him or his parents. Story 27. My dad told me about a friend of his who is Tongan, I'm pretty sure. And when he and his 5 brothers came to visit America for the first time in the early 80s, they went to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Well, according to my dad's friend, chicken is a scarce commodity where they're from, so they went a little overboard. My dad's friend said he and his 5 brothers were tiptoeing out of the door when they were done because they felt as though they would be in trouble for eating so much chicken. Apparently, the owners thought it was great and caught up with them in the parking lot to give them more chicken to take home. The guys were sweating when the owner came running out after them. Story 28. Not really a buffet, but I have worked multiple self-service stations. I've worked with a salad bar and donut case, but I've heard another story from a coworker who worked with the soup bar. When I would try setting up the salad bar in the morning, I had to do 2 trips because of the utensils. I would often catch and scold customers who tried to handle the salad with their bare hands and have tossed out a whole lot of salad once or twice because I was too late. Eventually, I brought out the utensils first before bringing the food, but even that wasn't foolproof. I've seen people pick up something they dropped and put it back in the respective container before. Yes, I tossed that too. The self-service donut case was a special time too. It wasn't unusual for someone to pick up a donut, take a bite, and then put it back if they didn't like it. I also once had an old guy manage to get chocolate icing all over the case. It looked like a monkey smeared poo all over the doors. And my favorite was a coworker told me that it was extremely common for customers to lick the portioning spoons for the soup bar. Story 29. We used to put out crab legs out every hour or so. There was a couple people loitering around the crab spot. When the legs were put down, this big lady just body checked a dude and grabbed all the crab legs at once using the plate as a kind of shovel. When he yelled at her, she said, "These are for my family." Story 30. Tourist buffet in Hawaii. A 5-year-old-ish child gets very excited for the chocolate pudding. It is the only thing he gets. It's a big-ass bowl. He takes the first bite and makes a face. It was poi, not chocolate pudding. Rip all that lovely poi. Story 31. I was the chef of a buffet. Decided I didn't want to do it anymore. It's got to be the most unsanitary, not the staff, the customer. Cheap, unhealthy, and exhausting experience I have ever had. Customers are disgusting. They will eat in line, with their fingers, straight from the steam table. Pick their nose, grab the serving utensils, use the same plates that they already ate from, use new plates. Imagine how often people will wash their hands, then realize they all touch those serving utensils on the line. That's right, that pizza you grabbed with the tongs? No, you eat it with grandpa's unwashed hands that wiped his own ass, or your neighbor's hands that just gitted himself off. The food is cheap, very cheap. The goal is about a 30% food cost on the high end. How much quality do you think you are getting? Why do you think they only give you a small, thin slice of beef? Pre-made processed foods, lower quality ingredients. The goal is to make money. It's incredibly unhealthy as well. They use starches, fats, and sugar to fill you up. Desserts were mostly frozen bulk purchased from Yes Foods, not fresh. Omelette bars were good if you wanted, but all veggies came in pre-sliced, and liquid eggs for the scrambled eggs. The buffet life wasn't for me. I left and transitioned to a different type of kitchen. And now I'm working with my family at a local business. I would say to skip buffets as much as you can, or eat the proteins like fish, chicken, beef, and fresh veggies. Stay away from everything else because it's most likely processed and or frozen. Story 32. It's the waste that offends me. I'm not judging you for indulging. I'm at the next table. I'm judging you for leaving an entire uneaten meal on the table you destroyed. Story 33. At a Chinese buffet, there was a table of 4 obnoxious women who acted like they'd never been in public before. Employee came out with a hotel pan of crab legs. One of the women snatched it out of his hand and took the whole pan to their table. Anyone nearing their table was greeted with evil stares like you were taking a snarling dog's food. Story 34. In my elementary school, in the higher grades, you could volunteer to help serve lunch for like a week. I remember one day I was supervising the salad bar and a girl got a spoon of sour cream, used the same spoon to get some bacon bits, took a moment to contemplate the spoon, then sucked it clean and put it back. I quickly took it. That was my first time I remember witnessing somebody being gross around food. Story 35. Went to a well-known place's breakfast. My ex and I were starving, having spent all morning helping her mother deal with nonsense. And we sat down, announced our intention, and headed to the buffet. Just as we arrived, this woman who was holding 2 plates for some reason dropped one, which hit on the counter and sent thousands of shards raining all over the place. She looked around like the dullard she was and started reaching for another plate. To the restaurant's immense credit, a manager immediately ran over, shut down the buffet, and told everyone that they'd have to order off the menu, but would get half off their check. If this was to their credit, it was to my absolute horror, as I'd only made it through that ghastly morning by thoughts of corned beef has. And these potato puffs they served. The perfectly fine breakfast I ended up eating ruined the rest of my day. I mean, how bad can peritonitis be? Story 36. In college, I worked at a pizza joint that had a 30-foot salad bar. This one lady came in, just ordered the salad bar, and went through. It was slow, so I was cleaning the front and saw her every move. She, no joke, stuck her finger in one dressing, licked it, then went to the next, stuck her finger in and licked. Ran over to stop her, gave her small containers to put them in first before tasting. Had to dump 2 containers worth of dressing. About 2 weeks later, she came back and did the same thing. That time we made her leave and take her food and go and no longer welcome. 2 weeks later, she's back, tries again, gets denied service, so goes into the parking lot and tries to get people to buy her lunch and join their party. The look of disgust from the people she was trying to scam when we told her the reason for her ban. Story 37. Not an employee. However, once when my family was on vacation in Florida, we went to a surf and turf ace. This was back in 1991 or 1992. Anyway, there was a family, table of 3, sitting at a nearby table already eating. All they were eating were crab legs and eating them like they were in a food eating contest. They would splash the crab meat into their bowls of butter and shovel it into their gaping maws. As soon as they were all finished, which included an extensive wipe down of their faces from the dripping butter, they would get up and go get more crab leg. If the crab legs were low at the buffet table, they would empty what was there and wait for them to be replenished, where they would continue to stack their plates until the tray was practically empty again, return to their tables, and continue their Olympian-style eating. Other diners were super frustrated by them both for their disregard for others being forced to wait in a line for further replenishing, and for the repulsive display they were putting on at their table. In the time my family was there, they probably went up at least 5 or 6 times. They were there before we got there and were still there when we left. In the time we were there, they outpaced my family, almost 1 in number of trips to the buffet, and probably quantity of food as well. The image of them eating and the butter dripping from their faces still haunts me, and is still a memory my family talks about. Story 38. I stopped eating at Golden Corral after I saw multiple children standing at the chocolate fountain, double dipping. Chocolate all over their grubby fingers, smeared on their faces. Germs endlessly cycling through that fountain. Story 39. I once saw a fat man in a moo-moo try and take an entire steam tray to his table. He ate so much that 2 employees had to physically drag him away from the buffet and eject him from the restaurant. The man eventually sued, saying he did not get all he could eat. Story 40. Was a patron, not employee. But back in college, we were in Las Vegas for a rugby tournament and stayed at the Gold Coast across the street from Rio. At the time, mid-90s, Rio was considered one of the best buffets there. So 25 of us are there after a day of tournament play, and someone, of course, suggests an eating contest. I finished almost dead last by only eating 5 plates of food. Our winner, a 6 feet 7 inches inch lock, ate 32. Then he promptly puked in the booth we were sitting in, so we got the boot. But a picture of all of our finished plates looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and an employee's is agog at how high it reached from the table. Story 41. I travel for work. At a previous company, the director of purchasing came with me on the first part of my trip. I dropped him at the airport and picked up a buyer who went with me for the rest of the week. The director asked me to look out for the buyer because he didn't travel much, and I kind of side-eyed him. Like, okay? First, we had to eat every meal at the hotel because he was afraid to leave the hotel. We were in Philadelphia in a nice area. When he checked in, the hotel, I think a Sheraton, it was a nice hotel, had a bowl of apples on the front desk so people checking in could grab an apple. He emptied the whole basket into his backpack, probably 8 big apples. Then he walked over to the little store closet and started clearing that out, and I was all, you have to pay for all of that. He thought it was free. The next morning at breakfast, they had a buffet or you could order from the menu. He took a fork, went over, and started eating out of the bins on the buffet like they were his plate. Then he got mad because they charged for the buffet and didn't offer him a menu. I had to cut off his alcohol consumption at dinner too. The director and I had a discussion about it when we got back. Story 42. Worked in a Chinese buffet in the UK until becoming physically disabled. Seen it all. People piling their plates with a literal mountain of food. You could go back as many times as you liked, just don't take more than you can each, because waste surcharge. Then covering the whole thing in sweet and sour sauce. People trying to wrap food up and even put the little dessert bowl in their bags, pockets, no takeout restaurant due to licensing. People getting their kid a plate full of something, then the kid not liking it. People saying their baby, clearly a toddler, wasn't going to be eating, then kicking up a fuss when told they needed to pay for the toddler. Kids mixing all the soft drinks off the refills together. Story 43. I've been doing this for a while, and I don't eat from buffets anymore. Leaning under the glass and sneezing on the salad bar, sipping from the soup ladle, picking up something with fingers, tasting it, and putting it back on the line. Visibly scratching under their skirt, sniffing, and then using the same fingers to flip through a stack of cookies like a Rolodex, dropping stuff onto the floor, and then putting it back into the pan, picking up an entire tray of 40 cheeseburgers, and walking off with it. The list goes on and on. My favorite memory, though, was when my old chef had had enough. Saw someone stick their fingers into the food, marched IP to this customer and said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I put my fingers in your mouth? Just grab your tongue and waggle around a bit? No? Then keep your damn hands out of the food." He wasn't around for much. Story 44. My parents were at the Pizza Ranch, a pizza chicken buffet chain in the Midwest. As they were eating, they watched a little girl around 6 years of age take her plate of leftovers and SC them all back into the buffet. They never went back to a buffet after that. Story 45. Chinese buffet in the UK about 20 years ago. Guy who'd been there stuffing his face for 3 hours. It was getting time to close, and he got really angry at being asked to finish up because he hadn't had all he could eat yet. Threatened that he was going to sue the owner and report him because all you can eat was a misleading trade description. The Simpsons didn't miss with that one episode. He didn't actually do anything, as far as I'm aware. Guess he was just hangry. We also had some really drunk guy who shat his pants at the table and carried on eating. People going to the toilets to vomit, then coming back out and loading their plates up again. That happened a couple of times when I was there. Perhaps bulimia related, not sure. Story 46. Just a guest, but this deserved to be here. Out of the blue, my son threw up into the buffet. It splattered on the area, and there's no chance in hell it didn't hit nearby dish container, or multiple in its vicinity. We are still kicking ourselves for not catching any signs that this was on its way, but it really caught us off guard. I immediately apologized profusely and explained the situation clearly. The kicker? The buffet staff then cleaned up the counter area around the dish and let it all just stay there. We paid, out of embarrassment, left immediately, and never came back. Looking back, I regret not informing some health authority. I'm struggling with buffets in general ever since this episode. Story 47. My wife and I once went to a Chinese buffet with acquaintances that we thought could be friends. Well, after 4 hours of watching the guy demolish plate after plate of food, and having the entire kitchen staff come out and watch like it was a circus show, I was done. He ate so much shrimp the kitchen staff couldn't keep up. It was insane. After that, I started watching how big my portions were at meals. It was disgusting. Sadly, but not surprising, he passed away from a heart attack a few years after that. Story 48. I'm not an employee, but I saw a lady dip her chicken wings directly into the ranch dressing at the salad bar and then place them on her plate. When I spoke up, she went off on me. I haven't gone to a buffet in at least 15 years, and I won't. People are just nasty ASF. Story 49. Obligatory, customer not employee. I went to a Golden Corral once, and never again. While there, I watched a kid pick his nose, stick his finger in the chocolate fountain, and then in his mouth. Repeatedly. Half his family was right there and did nothing. This was before pandemic, but I noticed a lot of customers coughing and sneezing around the food. So it did not surprise me to come down with the flu within 48 hours. Golden Corral must be the Florida Wally World parking lot of buffet restaurants. So yeah, chocolate-covered book. Story 50. There was a video I saw of a guy at a buffet that had lobster tails, and he was just grabbing all of them on multiple plates and taking them to his table and not eating them. Story 51. Not a buffet employee, but once, someone tried to police my plate. I was on a hiking tour. The weather turned sour, so about half of the other attendees just didn't show up. The tour guides mentioned it and told the group that there was extra food and to help ourselves. I was first in line at the buffet and helped myself to one extra piece of chicken and like another half scoop of rice. The woman beside me proceeds to tell me that since I'm first in line, I should wait for everyone else to help themselves before I get a second piece. I look at her, then at the entirely too much food for 6 people, back at her and say, "Would you like some of the food off of my plate?" She looked bewildered before scoffing out no. The guy next to her tried to stifle a giggle, and I just walked away. Story 52. As a patron, I once saw a 8-year-old kid run up to the fries excitedly, and his mom yelled at him he needed to eat a salad first. He begrudgingly said, "Okay," put lettuce on his plate, then ran back over to the fries and put them and some mini corn dogs on top. then drenched it in nacho cheese sauce. I was impressed. Story 53. Not super heinous, but way too common and inappropriate. People that don't use tongs to serve themselves. They just grab the food. I see this at hotel breakfasts all the time. I don't understand. You're not at home. How hard is it to use the tongs? Story 54. Not a buffet, but my dad owned a business in a small redneck kind of town. He and his employee used to go to this Greasy Spoon Burger Shack place for lunch. They walked in one day, and the restaurant was empty. They look over, and an employee was stirring a pitcher of iced tea with her bare arm. They never went back, and the place closed shortly afterward. Story 55. Was at a hot pot restaurant in Boston a few months ago, at the Mix Your Own Dipping Sauce station. There were about 15 or so sauces, each with its own ladle to add to your bowl. Watched in absolute horror as the lady in front of me taste tested multiple sauces directly from the ladles, like fully brought them to her lips and sampled, before putting them back. Immediately went to the GM and said that entire station probably needed to be changed out. Story 56. When I was a kid, I worked at a Golden Corral in the pre-chocolate fountain era. It was the cheese sauce on everything. Is half your plate covered in fruit and or dessert items? Who cares got a slather on an ungodly amount of cheese sauce covering the other half and soaking into everything anyway? Is cheese sauce an acceptable salad dressing? Of course, must be in at least equal parts cheese to vegetables. Bonus points if it gets on your Jell-O. If it's served at a Golden Corral, I've seen it covered in cheese sauce. Now that they've got those gross chocolate fountains, I'm sure things have gotten much worse. Story 57. My ex-girlfriend was a manager at one of the more popular buffets. Shout out to Shady Maple. Other than the crap show kids and dumb people can be, she had a group of Korean Elvis impersonators come in one day that housed chili and anything pickled. They asked for kimchi and didn't like most of the American food, but I guess chili and sauerkraut hit the spot. I had them later in the day when they came to my bar and they got so sloppy drunk that they threw up all the chili on the sidewalk outside where they were all smoking. One of them puked and crapped their pants on the toilet, and honestly, that's just commitment to the bit to try to die like the king. Story 58. This is going to get lost, but we once went to a Chinese buffet and were in line to pay when a woman vomited at the cash register, then argued with the person working about whether or not she should have to pay for the food she just threw up. Story 59. When I was a kid, my parents took us to a Chinese buffet where they have snow crabs on the weekend. I remember watching a lady with multiple plates of crab, happily peeling all the meat off, and put them all in a bowl that's full of that melted butter and ate it all like soup. I love dipping my crab in butter, but not slurp up all that butter like soup. Story 60. I'm not an employee, but I've seen. At a Pizza Hut buffet, I saw a kid who would jam his fist down into the bacon bits and haul out a huge handful every time he went past the buffet. Not the cleanest looking kid in the world. Either, though that doesn't matter, it's gross regardless. I never got the buffet anyway. It was gross by definition, like Cece's is all the time. And my own sainted mother once put a hard-boiled egg from the Chinese buffet into her pocket. Only it wasn't hard-boiled and soon broke. Story 61. At a Chinese buffet, I saw a guy get vanilla ice cream and then ladle on sweet and sour sauce. I stared, expecting him to be like, oh, silly me. But he just sat down and ate it. I followed and checked. Later on, I decided to try sweet and sour sauce on vanilla ice cream, in case he was privy to some wild new flavor combination, but it was gross. He was just some working class, middle-aged man. I don't get it. Story 62. Not a buffet, but a salad bar at a grocery store. Some lady was just shoveling cut fruit into her mouth hand over fist, juice and bits flying everywhere. I called her out on it. I was appalled and disgusted. She tried to turn it around like I was harassing her. I went and found a manager, but they didn't do anything. She was well practiced, not her first gluttonous crime. I was leery of buffets and salad bars before, but now I avoid them like the plague. Story 63. At a Sizzler back in the 1980s, a woman changed her baby's diapers at a table right next to the all-you-can-eat salad bar and left the dirty diaper there. Story 64. Not a buffet worker, but at Old Country Buffet Rip, once saw a family get plate after plate of fried chicken and only eat the skin. Literally piles of chicken at their table with no skin. Pretty sure workers weren't taking the plates away, in hopes the family would eat the chicken. Similarly, went to a pizza buffet and saw a dude just eating cheese and toppings and leaving the bread. Must have had 6 pizzas worth of bread at his table when he left. Story 65. Not an employee, but a customer here. There was a Chinese buffet that offered free crab legs on certain nights of the week. There was a lady that would go there who was notorious for gatekeeping the crab legs. She would stand nearby and wait for them to be refilled so she could take most. All of them before anyone could get to them. This sounds like a joke, but it's not. She finally got kicked out, and the police called on her because she bit another customer who confronted her on it. Wild times those were. Story 66. Not an employee, but as a customer witnessed the Chinese staff member that handled the stir-fry flat top. He was cleaning the surface with the tools he used to cook with, and proceeded to take the burnt crusties and place in the trash, then pushed said trash down with said tools, and continue to cook with them. I left. Story 67. Sunday buffet lunch in Australia. I saw a giant Samoan guy try to take the tray of chicken wings out of the warmer to take back to his table. The waiter kindly had to tell him that's not how it works. Story 68. Not an employee, but I saw a guy at Sweet Tomatoes stand there and scoop out all the chicken from a giant vat of chicken noodle soup and fill up over 16 bowls in a tray while there was a line behind him. Saw him again doing something similar when I went there again a few weeks later. They are out of business. They said it was because of the lockdown, but I still blame him. Story 60. I was the new guy at a warehouse job. Apparently, once a month, the whole crew went to this all-you-can-fit buffet. In my first time going with them, I kept the to-go box open and filled both sides of it. The guys I worked with were speechless that no one ever thought to do that. Good time. Story 70. I'm a doctor. I had an individual from a group home see me one day, and he would constantly put his hand down the back of his pants, grab around, and then bring his hand out and smell it. You can imagine my horror when about a week later, I saw him at a buffet with the rest of the... Story 71. We went to a decent buffet with my family when I was little. Prices that guarantee good food. My grandpa, being the weird guy he is pocketed with some fish to take home, didn't tell anyone and forgot. Put the pants in the hamper. Closet started to stink. Mom found old stinky fish in his pants in the hamper. Right in the trash, along with whatever else got contaminated. Story 72. Not an employee. Went to Buffett with a couple of friends. They served freshly roasted chickens, pieces cut as per your request. There were 2 guys who ate 4 whole chickens. We lost our appetite just by watching them eat. Story 73. I was behind a guy years ago in a buffet line when he scooped up a large spoonful of cottage cheese, and as he brought it to his plate, the spoon hit the plastic sneeze shield and it dumped into a lady's purse in front of him that was hanging on her arm. He quickly left the line with a horrified look on his... Story 74. Took my 10-year-old and his best friend to Golden Corral, where we would have our dinner challenge. Everyone made each other's plates, and you had to eat what was brought back. 10-year-olds are creative. Story 75. Not an employee. But a few years ago, a woman sitting next to us took all the lemons from the buffet and sat there and made a lemon-based sauce from them, soy sauce and some other sauces. At the end, she must have used 20 lemons by continually going up to the buffet after they replenished them. Story 76. When I worked at a Ponderosa steakhouse when I was in high school, a lady would come in once a week and fill an entire to-go bag with cherry tomatoes from the salad bar. The manager would stare her down, but would not say or do anything. He said it was corporate rules, not to interfere. Story 77. This isn't really a culinary crime a patron committed, but I used to work at a country club in college, and at the Easter brunch, someone accidentally put a bowl of sour cream out on the kids' dessert table for the ice cream sundae bar instead of whipped cream, and it took a beat for anyone to realize. Story 78. Not an employee, but I saw a woman at Golden Corral take an ice cream cone and then full-on run it in her hand through the chocolate fountain as they were walking out the door. Their hand was completely dripping with chocolate, and they left a chocolate trail behind them as they walked out. Story 79. We had a regular customer at our Asian all-you-can-eat who binged on sushi and stir-fry for the whole evening and repeatedly threw up, self-induced, between a few meals to, as he said, make more room to enjoy the food and not have all the calories. So sad. Story 80. Some parents were spotted dipping their baby's bottle into the communal soup pot. Not a ladle, literally submerging the bottle. Repeatedly, staff had to throw out the entire pot and sanitize everything. Story 81. I accidentally ordered too much sushi. Should have told them to stop bringing me food, but was afraid to. I thought it was too late. They eventually told me they are pausing my order, and I was thankful for that. I should have told them to stop, but thought that they would have made it already. Story 82. Worked at my college dining hall and had a guy several times a week get a soup bowl and filled as high as he could with black olives and then cover every square centimeter of it with ranch. I'll never look at black olives the same way again. Story 83. In my mom's hometown, there was a buffet place that did lunch and supper. The lunch was slightly cheaper than the supper. People would come in at lunch, eat, then sit around all afternoon until the supper food came out and then load up again. The place eventually went out of business. Go figure. Story 84. I saw a man fill himself absolutely full, stagger out into the parking lot, vomit what looked like gallons of vomit, and then try to come back in for more. Story 85. One guy just picked up the large serving tray of prawns and took it back to his table and ate straight out of it. It was my brother's birthday dinner, and he loves prawns, and specifically chose that restaurant because of their seafood. He was so pissed. Story 86. Not quite it, but one time my mom went to get some soup. She was eating it and was like, wow, this is really good. Why haven't I ever eaten it before? Took a look and it was a bowl of gravy. And yes, I still bring it up. She still gets embarrassed. Story 87. I was behind a lady in the salad line and noticed she didn't get any dressing. Whatever, eat your dry salad. As I was finishing up, I saw her dump 2 ladles of brown gravy on her salad. Story 88. Not an intentional crime, but my mom loves to tell a first date story where her date filled up a bowl of ice cream, came back to the table so excited, took him a big old bite, and it was butter. Story 89. I'm not an employee, and this is anticlimactic, but my dad will beg us to go to a buffet. He gets one plate with like 1 or 2 things on it and calls it quits. Not wasting food, but wasting money. All-you-can-eat buffet workers, what are your horror stories? Not a horror story, just funny. I worked at Wendy's when they had salad bars. You could get a single-serving bowl. They used to serve eat-in chili in styrofoam bowls, and the large doubled as a chili bowl, or all-you-can-eat platters, the taco salad bottom plate. On a slow afternoon, this guy came in and got a single-serving bowl. After a few minutes, our manager motioned to me and the sandwich guy to discreetly take a look at the salad he was making. The guy had filled the bowl with salad, then made a ring of overlapping cucumber slices to extend the lip of the bowl upward. He filled that with salad, then added another ring. It took several minutes to build this thing, but by the time he'd finished, he had a tower of salad well over a foot tall, with multiple rings of cucumber slices containing it. That salad was an engineering marvel. He carefully carried it back to his table, sat down, then looked up guiltily as our manager walked out to him. The manager handed him a free item coupon and said, "That's the most impressive salad I have ever seen. Your next one is on me." Story 2. Picked up some fish and chips recently. Saw they had all-you-can-eat on Wednesdays. So I asked, what is the most that someone... 18 pieces of fish and 3 plates. She held up this huge platter of fries. Every single Wednesday. So he eats that exact order every week? Yes, and he goes to a different all-you-can-eat every day of the week. He got banned from the Chinese place down the road. Story 3. College friend worked at a Chinese buffet. He said they caught a regular dipping his pizza in the wonton soup bowl, like in the queue and not at his table, and eating it. Bite, dip, bite, dip, bite, dip. After the 4th time in a month he did, management finally kicked him out. Story 4. At one point, I worked for a pizza place that used to have a day buffet that I would make pizzas for. One time, 2 huge dudes come in the moment we opened for the buffet. The manager on duty dropped the first 2 pizzas down on the buffet, turned to grab the next 2, turned back, and both pizzas were gone. A few minutes later, both dudes walk back up and each take an entire pizza again and walk back to continue eating. They proceeded to do this over and over, grabbing an entire pizza each for themselves for the entire 3 hours. We were offering the buffet. Was one hell of a day. Story 5. I had a coworker that briefly managed Orion's buffet. He said that it was fairly common for people to gorge themselves, then purge in the restroom and start eating again so that they could get their money's worth. Story 6. There was a fairly expensive restaurant in Dallas in the 80s called Southern Kitchen. About $25 per person back then, with food served to the table. Really good stuff. They were famous for cinnamon rolls. The owner said he'd seen many, many women ruin expensive purses hiding those rolls. Man, I missed that plate. Story 7. Obligatory, not a buffet worker, just a witness. We were waiting in line for the soft serve machine at Golden Corral. The woman in front of us gets up to the machine and awkwardly gets the handle around in an attempt to get at the sweet ice cream within. She's pushing, pulling, twisting, doing literally everything but turning it to the right, which would have dispensed the ice cream. She's really perplexed by this, so she takes the next logical step, of course, which is to wrap her lips around the spout, form a seal on it with her mouth, and start trying to suck it right out of the tap. One of the workers sees this and looks on in disgust before he unplugs the machine. On the way out, we see that he put an out-of-order sign on it, so thankfully they didn't keep serving it after that whole incident. Story 8. A waiter at a buffet in Vegas told me the following story. Had an elderly couple flag me down at their table. The man says, "This is the worst guacamole I've ever had." Waiter replied, "That's wasabi." Story 9. I worked at a pizza buffet for 2 years during collage. I have a number of stories, but the one that I will always remember is the guy who got super upset that we wouldn't make more dessert pizza when we were half an hour past closing time. This guy comes in with his presumed wife and 2 children around 8:30. We close at 9. Nothing out of the ordinary happens until 9 rolls around, where it was still commonplace for people to be finishing up and eating what pizza was still left. I was doing the dishes and taking the empty dishes back from the buffet, and I see this guy, arms crossed and staring at me as I take the empty dessert pizza dish. He says something to the effect of, "When the next one coming out? I never got any." I let him know that we close at 9, and we can't really make anything past then because the oven gets shut off. Luckily, the manager overheard this and stepped in to back me up, and I quickly scamper off to the back to continue the dishes. He seemed pissed, but it wasn't unheard of. As being a cheap pizza buffet, you don't exactly bring in the most affluent. About 5 minutes later, as I'm finishing up the plates, the same manager comes barreling through the back door, out of breath. He grabs 2 of the long wooden pizza pushers and says, "Come with me." I have no idea what's going on, but I grab the pusher and follow him out the door. I learned later on that he started flipping out. Throwing the register and a fishbowl, he grabbed a broom and swung that around, hitting the girl behind the counter. This bit we caught on camera as I exit from the back. This guy is screaming and ranting unintelligibly. He was just asking for a fight. He walked up to the manager, got all up in his face, and kind of pushed him back. He came at me next, and I was really close to taking a swing at his knees or something, but the other manager had quickly gotten back up and he resumed harassing him. After about 2 minutes of tiptoeing around a brawl and his wife presumably screaming for him to get back in the car, he eventually gets in and they drive off. I won't forget the glossed-over look in his eyes as he came after me. Freaks me out to this day. Story 10. I was once at an old country buffet, waiting patiently to get some mac and cheese. The kid in front of me plied his plate high and then started tapping the serving spoon to get all of the chessy goodness, free from the confines of the spoon. Once he was satisfied with his handiwork, he licked the spoon clean. I didn't have any mac and cheese and haven't been back since... Story 11. Went as a customer to a Golden Corral. I'm walking to the chocolate fountain and 3 little girls step in front of me, and all 3 of them just go hands deep in the fountain. The family was the first table by the fountain, and all they did was laugh about how cute it was. Employees turned it off immediately. Story 12. I managed a buffet in a casino in Reno for a few months. Had this family come in, mom, dad, 2 little kids. I get called over to the table because the mom had thrown up on her plate, table, and wanted us to take it away and clean it up. I asked if she was okay, and she said she always throws up when she eats cheese. She had gotten herself an enchilada. It was Mexican theme night. WTF, lady, enchiladas pretty much always have cheese. I told her I would have to call janitorial because none of my staff was trained to handle biohazard. She didn't understand why I couldn't just take it. Janitorial came in and couldn't clean up because she refused to move from the table. So janitorial left. She calls me back over and starts yelling at me. Dad starts yelling too. Apparently she wanted to keep eating after throwing up, which I thought was really gross. I had them sit at another table so they could all keep eating. Janitorial came back and cleaned the other table. Finally, they go to leave and decide to make a huge scene in front of the whole restaurant and demand their money back. I refuse. Dad gets in my face and starts shouting that I'm just a git, and his wife makes loads more money than I do. I call security and they storm out, pulling pictures off the wall and shattering them on the floor. And Dad also picked up a vase and broke it. The 2 kids are running around and banging on the walls. Security finally shows up after they ran off. I have to do a report, and they were put on the 86 list. I ducking hate people. Story 13. I worked as a server at a Chinese buffet, and 4 things came to mind instantly. 1. A middle-aged woman puked on her table and blamed it on giving herself the wrong insulin. The 4 mountains of food she destroyed probably contributed too. Profusely apologized and tipped me $1. 2. I tried to pick up a dirty plate off a table that had a big pool of hibachi sauce, grease on it. The customer stopped me and said, "That's the best part." Then proceeded to drink the sauce like it was the milk after a bowl of cereal. 3. A young mother complained to me because the crab meat and cheese that we serve on the buffet made her child sick and they threw up. Her child was an infant, not even a year old. I'm no child care expert, but baked artificial crab meat and mozzarella can't be good for a baby. 4. The restaurant was raided by ICE one morning shortly before opening. The entire back of the house and one of our managers were deported. Story 14. Not an employee, but I was standing behind a woman at Hometown Buffet. She was getting some lasagna or something, basically a really cheesy pasta that when you lift the serving utensil, a lot of cheese hangs on. I witnessed her lift her pasta, twirl all the excess cheese that was connected around her index finger, and there was a lot, clip it off with her thumbnail, and then fling it back into the pasta. I knew I shouldn't have been at Hometown Buffet in the first place, but this solidified my stance to never go back. Story 15. At one point, myself and 2 other family members worked at a Golden Corral, each in different sections. Because small towns don't have a lot of job options for high school, college kids. I worked in the bakery, which was surprisingly low in horror stories, other than the chaos that remained after a large group of children came through. My brother worked the steak station. He got these regulars that would tip him pretty well if he would prepare blue steaks for them. The very idea of ordering blue steaks from a buffet makes me gag. My cousin worked the salad bar. Management would require her to keep seafood items on the bar for long after the point where they'd be safe to consume. I think the record was chilled shrimp from Mother's Day that stayed for over a week and a half. They finally caved and let her toss them when a customer complained about the smell. Story 6. My parents owned an all-you-can-eat buffet, and I was there every day of my life from 4 to 14. My favorite horror story is when a couple came in to eat, obviously. They loved the crab legs, and every time my mom put some out, they took it all. Also, just a reminder, crab legs are expensive. Forget the other customers, they just took it and ate it all. So they're there for maybe 2 hours now, and it's getting dark. They've eaten through at least a week's stock of crab leg, and my mom finally decides it's enough. She stops putting it out in the buffet and brings individual plates to the customers who wanted it. but couldn't get any due to this couple. Understandably, the couple is angry. They literally flipped the chairs at their table, flipped their plates, bowls, cups, etc., and completely trashed their area. Food was all over the floor, table, chairs, sticky soda was dripping into the carpet. They left in a hurry, but someone caught their license plate. We called the cops, and I think they said they charged them with something. I can't remember the aftermath details clearly because I was probably 8 or 9 years old, 20 now. I just remember looking at the mess and feeling really angry that my sister and I had to clean it up with our mom. It was a family-run business, so we didn't have much help. Anyways, that's my horror story. The end. Story 17. Not a buffet, but I worked at a pizza parlor that offered a lunch buffet of endless pizza. Lunch ran from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. This gentleman comes in, I think he was homeless. He serves up a sky-high plate of pizza and just goes to town. He stayed from the beginning to the very end to make sure he got his money's worth. Well, his body didn't appreciate being stuffed like a piñata of pizza. He got up, waddled fast to the bathroom. And next thing I know, I'm being told he had liquid crap trailing behind him to the bathroom and inside the bathroom. I was informed by my boss about the incident. I told him I was just heading out for a break. I was not about to clean that up. Story 18. Not mine, but I had a buddy who was 400 pounds, and the dude could put away some food. He went to a casino buffet that was one of the higher-end ones that had crab legs and steak. On about his 4th or 5th plate, stacked full of crab legs, the manager came out and gave him $250 in free slot play to leave the buffet. So I linked this to my buddy, who pointed out that there were 2 other dudes there and none of them was under 300 pounds. They killed a metric duck ton of food between them, and he was putting them to shame. The buffet was higher end, so it was $50 a person, but they easily all ate probably 4 times that, and he ate probably 10 times that worth in food. He then went on to win just over $100 with that free slot play as well. If you can't beat the casinos at the games, beat them at the bar or buffet. Story 19. Not a worker, but I was at a Chinese buffet with a hot pot option that you had to pay extra for. There was a separate section with the stuff for that which was raw. This guy loaded up his plate with all this raw stuff and was eating it, including dangerous raw stuff like shrimp. I think he may have been slightly intellectually disabled. The Chinese staff had to come over and inform him that he was eating the wrong things and try to explain it to him. He got really embarrassed and said that he did not understand how it worked. Between the Chinese staff with their limited English, and this poor guy who was not capable of really understanding what he had done wrong, it was one of those awkward moments in a life that you cannot forget no matter how much you try. Story 20. Not an employee, but a customer. A long time ago, my mom and I picked up a friend of hers, and we went to a local Chinese food buffet. This place had a thing where you could get a pound of food for $5 in a takeout container instead of sitting and eating at the restaurant if you want, so that was our plan. The 3 of us were browsing around the buffet line with our takeout containers, adding what we wanted to them. And then I noticed my mom's friend doing something damn disgusting. He was eating a chicken wing, like right in front of the buffet line, hiding his face behind his takeout container. And then he took the chicken bone and put it back in the buffet tray. I walked over to my mom and told her what he was doing. And at first, she thought I was joking. So she walked over towards him, and now he was standing there eating a slice of watermelon right off the buffet, and then putting the rind back in the tray. So my mom is like, "What the heck are you doing?" And he's like, "Don't worry, I do this all the time. They never notice." So of course, both me and mom are panicking, worried that they're going to call the cops or something because of this disfit. We basically pretended to not know him and continued to fill up our containers the right way. After a couple minutes, one of the employees walks up to my mom and tells her that they noticed what the guy was doing. And they noticed that we were also uncomfortable about it and didn't intend to blame us. But they warned her that if she doesn't get him to pay for the food in his container and leave immediately, they'll be calling the police. So of course mom tells him that we need to go. Now. And he just brushes it off like, "I don't care. They're not going to do anything." Well, me and mom walked up to the front, paid for our containers, apologized, and walked out and left him in there. A minute later, you can see and hear him shouting with the staff. He throws his container on the ground and food splatters everywhere. He storms out, shouting insults as he leaves, and of course gives them a, "I'm never coming back," to which they reply, "You're not allowed in here no more. We'll call the cops." So we're standing out by the car, waiting for him. Of course, we yell at him for being a piece of crap. We get in the car, and the next thing you know, this mother ducker starts pulling chicken wings and Chinese donuts out of his ducking pockets and eating them. We dropped him off at home and never spoke to him again. Story 21, not a worker. But I went to Hometown Buffet, and the kid in front of me was slightly shorter than the buffet bar, but had his hands in the yellow Jell-O, just massaging it. Then his mom came by and snatched him away but didn't say anything while a guy came and made himself a bowl of Jell-O. 10-year-old me was too appalled to say anything. I haven't eaten Jell-O since then. Story 22. My first job was as a dishwasher in an all-you-can-eat fried catfish buffet. People are animals, especially the ones that get far more food off the buffet than they can eat. Then they take the leftovers and pile them on a plate or tray, cover in ketchup and tartar sauce, then pour their iced tea over the top of all that. A lot of people did. That got at least 2 plates like that a night. Story 23. A woman came in with 2 of her kids and had a pretty regular meal. You pay when you leave at our place, and she decided to sneak out with her younger daughter before paying, leaving her underage son alone at the table. We caught on pretty quick and sent someone after her who found her in her car in the parking garage, waiting for her son to come as well. She refused to come back in and pay, so we had to keep her son hostage until the police came to handle the situation. What some people will do to their kids, I swear. We also found out from her son that she stole one of the manager's key cards, and they would regularly come into the hotel and use the card to go swimming in the top floor pool. Smart, I'll give her that, but still. Story 24. Not a worker, but I once saw a grown man have a childlike meltdown over the fact that he showed up to Soup Plantation too late and missed out on the biscuits and gravy. Years ago, I worked at an all-you-can-eat country buffet in South Carolina. I was a busboy. One day, I went to a table. It was a mess, as per usual. It looked to be a large group of families of around 12 people or so. The thing that stuck it in my memory is that whenever they had finished with what they were going to eat, they would SC their plate and use it again. SC their plates onto the floor next to their chairs. So next to each chair, there was a 6-inch to 18-inch pile of chicken bones, crab legs, mashed potatoes, remnants of baked potatoes, etc. Just disgusting. Story 26. Not an employee, but I witnessed a marvelous thing. Sitting in a small-town Chinese buffet. 3 big dudes, not obese, but farm-built big, come in. These guys proceed to just clean house, plate after plate after plate. They weren't wasteful. They ate everything they took. They were very polite to the staff and other customers. But I bet each man ate a dozen plates, each stacked high. The cooks were working to keep up. My family and I found ourselves watching this marvelous feat of eating unfold in awe. When they approached the counter to pay, all this eating unfolding in only 45 minutes or so, the manager greeted them at the counter. In his broken English, he simply said, "You men, you no pay, but you no come back." The guys gave each other and the manager a "yeah, fair enough" look and left. Story 27. I served at Golden Corral for 6 months, and it was a god-awful place. You'd think it would be easy because you don't take orders, right? Wrong. Cleaning up the messes, bussing tables, getting drinks and clean plates, singing for birthdays plus side work definitely kept you busy. Most of the customers weren't the greatest. They made an appalling mess, let their kids run wild, didn't tip. We were paid $2.13 an hour and needed tips, no matter how much you bent over backward for. I saw so many unaccompanied kids reaching into the buffet serving dishes. I saw one kid dip his marshmallow into the chocolate fountain, lick the chocolate off, and put the same marshmallow back in over and over. The customers weren't normally very easy to deal with. Rudeness was the norm there. For example, people got into a physical fight over a table on Easter Sunday. The managers were bananas. They abused everyone, both seemed to hate women, and took advantage of the fact that a lot of the staff was foreign. When we got a negative mystery shop report, we all were gathered into a meeting to be screamed at. When the next shop report was excellent. Nothing at all was said. The report was just posted to the bulletin board. My one boss told me to be sure to report all my tips to the IRS since he was sure I'd be a waitress all my life. He wanted to make sure I'd get something from Social Security when I was old. Spoiler. I'm no longer a waitress. I have a great job with an excellent retirement plan. Not that serving isn't a good job, but it made me so mad that I was 22 at the time, and this was his assumption. The managers carried the tea bags in their pockets. If your customer wanted a cup of tea, you had to track a boss down, and they would snarlingly, begrudgingly hand one over. Servers were also expected to catch and confront people stealing from the buffet, putting leftovers in their bag, for example. We weren't allowed to eat. Most cheaper restaurants will give you a meal per shift, but not GC. It was hard when you saw how much was wasted to not think you deserved a piece of bread or broken cookie maybe. To eat, you had to clock out, get in line, pay half price, get your plate, and then sit down. After 5 minutes, a manager would almost always come over and say, "We're busy, break's over." So you had to get back to work and throw your food away. I'm hypoglycemic, so my solution was to eat right before work and carry a granola bar in my pocket. I could eat the bar and get away with it in the women's bathroom because the managers were both men. One time, I was so stressed out and trying to scarf down my bar while in the next stall, a very large woman took a very large and smelly dump. I realized that it was one of the worst moments in my life. I quit shortly thereafter, got a much better job, and called up GC's corporate office to tell them everything. Story 28. I used to cook for a breakfast buffet back in 2013 as one of my first jobs. The restaurant in question I won't say the name of, but rhymed with meat and bark. Most of the customers that we got at the restaurant in general would be old people. A lot of the old people were very entitled and would come straight from church to the restaurant for their breakfast buffet. I'll just make a list. 1. One old lady kept implying that I wasn't old enough to work there. I said many times my real age, 17 at the time, and she kept saying, I bet they're just making you say that. You know it's illegal that they're making you do this. And I'm just at a loss and don't know what else to tell this lady, who is 100% confident that I must be underage or working for free or something. I don't know what her goal was. 2. A guy taking all of the bacon and putting it on his plate and then telling me to look at that, the empty spot where the bacon was before he took it. And I said, okay, looking? What am I looking for? And he said, tell me what's wrong with that. And I say, I don't know. Is it not clean or something? And he says, there's no bacon left. Aren't you going to refill it? And I'm like, well, that's weird. It was just filled a couple minutes ago. Someone must have took it all, knowing it was him. And he couldn't put 2 and 2 together and just said, I don't know, but there's no bacon there, so what are we going to do about it? 3. Some lady looking at bacon in disgust and saying, wow, it's 2013, who even eats meat anymore? Really? 4. Some lady shows up to the buffet 15 minutes after it closes, while we're taking it down, and says, whoa, what are you doing? I haven't even gotten my food yet. And we tell her politely that the buffet had closed 15 minutes ago, and the servers even give a last call on the buffet 15 minutes before it closes. Her response, that's okay, I'll just go complain to your manager. I just said, okay, sounds good. In my head, I'm like, what? You're going to tell my manager that the buffet closed 15 minutes ago? He knows. Well, mile 5. Nothing huge, but the same lady would come to the restaurant at least twice a week and complain about how crappy her service is each time and how terrible the food is. Finally, one of the hostesses said, if the service is so bad and the food is so bad, then why do you come here multiple times a week? Which shut her up. Lamau. Story 29. I didn't work at an all-you-can-eat, but my sister did. The buffet itself was on the first floor, so you had to take either the stairs or the elevator to your seat. Once there was a lady who was carrying a tray with a whole lot of stuff on it down, glasses, plates, and a whole lot more of junk. My sister asked the lady if she needed any assistance, to which the lady replied, you assume because I'm fat, I need help. My sister didn't react. A few seconds later, the lady fell down the stairs. There was blood and food everywhere. Story 30. The professor of my college microbiology class was also a director at the state health department in charge of inspecting restaurants. The first thing she told us on day 1 was never ever eat at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Story 31. I was a customer, not a worker. My wife and I went to a Sweet Tomatoes for a lunch date. Unlimited salad and soup was always good. One time I saw a man over by the soups take the serving ladle for one of the weekly specials and take a big slurp from it. Then apparently he didn't like it and spat it back out into the ladle and put the ladle back in the soup. What F, dude? I got up immediately and told the nearest staff what I'd seen, and they got right on getting that nearly full pot of soup out of there. I didn't have any more soup that visit. The what-ifs were too damn strong. Which is a shame, because I loved their chunky chicken noodle. Story 32. I used to work in an all-you-can-eat buffet. I would usually be the one who cleans up after people once closing hours pass. Essentially, I was the de facto janitor of the place. This one time I had to clean the bathrooms after the place closed. No problems in the female bathroom, but when I went into the male restroom, the image was burned into my retina instantly. An old man was lying on the floor, face down in a puddle of muck. Not just any sewage muck, but opaque, black muck. It had the color of motor oil. Smelled awful, too, like a mix of fecal matter and rotting durian. Certainly didn't help that the liquid wasn't just smeared all over the floor, but spread across the walls, too. There were ducking handprints across the wall, presumably when the geezer was trying to stand himself up. I peered into the toilet, more of that brown liquid, along with chunks of corny poop. There's also this fluid in your digestion called chyme. It's basically the thing right before food turns into poop, the pulpy, acidic liquid with partially digested food in it. I could see scraps of chicken breast and sauce mixed in there with the pulpy chyme. As for the old guy, well, turns out he didn't merely faint. He actually passed. He had his pants off. Presumably, he crapped himself to death. But I don't know. Ducker emptied himself like one of those cement mixers you'd see in a cartoon. Except you just replace the cement with a liquid that embodies death itself. Needless to say, I, like him, emptied my digestive contents just from the opposite end that he did. After that, I quit. Damn that place, man. Story 33. I was just a witness, but I saw how a woman came in with about 5 kids, and she made them all sit at a table while she got food, even if they seemed old enough to get it themselves. She just grabbed 2 trays, placed 3 plates on both of them, and literally poured all the chicken nuggets on one plate, so it was a huge mountain. She did the same to 5 other dishes, and left 5 pans that were full or almost full before she came empty. Needless to say, people were pissed, especially when she did it multiple times again with other dishes, and would often glare at people if she saw them taking food from dishes she probably wanted. Story 34. So I work in an all-you-can-eat using tablets. This is, according to my boss, based on a Japanese kind of restaurant. We serve mostly Asian food, from Chinese to Japanese and even some Korean. The premise is that people order their food in rounds, and we then bring the food to their table when it is ready. We always warn customers beforehand that if they leave food behind because they ordered too much, they will have to pay extra, depending on what they left behind. We have seen people try the weirdest stuff if it comes to not paying extra. People dumping food in their handbags, to people shoving it in their mouths, then go to the toilet and flush it, to putting hair on it and blaming us for it. We see them pull this stuff, etc. And when we actually catch them doing it, they blame us for it and refuse to pay. Some people let it come down to the police to sort it out sometimes. There have been multiple occasions on which they were involved to solve the problem for just €5. I guess some people's greed has no extent. Story 35. I've always wanted to make a documentary and just tour the country, stopping at every Golden Corral and Ryan's. There, I would interview the employees to learn what is the worst thing they have found in the chocolate fountain. I mean, what could be the worst? A shoe? A finger? Maybe a diaper? Story 36. I bus at a slightly nicer restaurant. On Fridays and Sundays, we offer a prime rib and crab leg buffet among a salad bar, hot and cold entrees, and a dessert bar. It's honestly pretty nice, and our buffet runner keeps anyone from doing ungodly things to the buffet. But the one incident that will always stand out to me was when this family of 5 came. From the moment they came in to the moment they left, they ate as many crab legs as they possibly could. Their server and I were clearing plates off as fast as, but every time we would return, it seemed like another mountain of crab leg shells would appear in front of each member of that family. I know not how they ate so much, and I honestly can't recall if they are anything besides the crab. Piles upon piles of shells were left upon the table after they left. It was truly a sight to behold. What's more is, after I wiped down the table and came back with settings, I had to get another rag to wipe down the table again because something in the crab leg juice combined with our sanitizer and left a nice milky residue upon the table. Delicious. When I leave this job, I'll never be able to look at crab legs the same way. Story 37. Family was gone, and I saw their dirty plates with napkins crumpled on top, so of course I clean it up and bust the plates. 15 minutes later, they come back and the mom starts yelling at me in Spanish, so I get my coworker to translate. And basically, her daughter's retainers were in the napkin, and I already threw them away. She kept complaining about how they were $250, so I literally had to dig through a huge trash can full of a sludge of food and drinks for 15 minutes. But fortunately, I found them, and the daughter thanked me, and she seemed embarrassed that her mom made me dig through the trash. Story 38. Not an employee or a customer, but we had a Chinese buffet shut down for a health code violation, which was employee was cutting veggies while taking a crap. To this day, I still wonder if that means dude brought a bucket into the kitchen or veggies into the crapter, and I honestly don't know which is worse. Story 39. While I was wasting years and thousands of dollars in the attempt to get a college education, I worked at a Chinese restaurant. The owners were awesome people BTW and would feed us at the end of the shift. Anyway, they had a buffet on the weekends, and they had this one land whale who was a regular. This lady could pack away the groceries. When she showed, the Chinese servers would rush into the kitchen and yell, "She here, she here." And the owners, who were also the cooks, would yell, "Oh no, cook faster, and then make a big show of cooking extra quickly. Then the entire restaurant staff would watch her eat with great amusement. Even by our American buffet standards, that lady could eat. Story 40. Probably the big couple I had. Dude was 600 pounds, wife 450 pounds, and only able to walk via using the wheelchair she was pushing him in. He held the plates while she scooped and then pushed him. Back at the table, she was almost having breathing problem while eating. Both were spilling food on themselves while eating. The table next to them asked to be moved as they are disgusted by watching them commit a slow pass. Story 41. Not me, but my uncle is a chef and is right now rotating around different carveries, what us Brits call buffets, trying to show them how to properly run the business and make actual edible food. So people will come back and the place won't shut down. He's told me of a few places that even he's not wanted to go into because of the state of the kitchen, and he questions how they haven't hit someone yet. Most recent one is chefs just cutting of the rotten pieces of food and then serving it. He has had to fire multiple people on the spot for stuff like that. Story 42. I worked at a Shoney's in high school, and we had a breakfast buffet every day and a seafood buffet on Friday nights. You'd see stuff dropped in the wrong containers, cheese sauce splattered everywhere, people tasting things off the bar instead of at their seats. The leftover Friday fish fillets became fish chowder the next morning. The leftover chowder from Friday also became chowder the next day. My understanding is that you are not allowed to save cream-based soups and foods from one day to the next. We would serve that stuff all weekend. We also often had nasty, slippery shrimp we would bread and serve. I handled so much shrimp on a daily basis there that I smelled like dead fish nearly all the time, even after showering. Story 43. Not a buffet worker, but I was on holiday in the Caribbean, and at the hotel there was an all-you-can-eat buffet. I had finished my dinner and went up to the dessert station where it had self-serve ice cream and was in a queue behind two people. The person at the front was by observation a mid-30s Floridian woman. I myself was British, and so was the person directly in front of me. Anyway, she gets a bowl and takes the little ice cream scoop and ducking licks it, then scrunches up her face, goes to the chocolate flavor, and does the same thing again. At this point, I'm just like, nah, I'll pass. The person behind already left, and the one in front of me just muttered, "You ducking pig." She then turns to us with a confused expression and says, "What? There's water to wash it in anyway." So that's how I lost my faith in humanity. Don't worry, I'd lost my faith in Floridians long before. Edit. The reason I could tell she was Floridian was her accent. Hope that clarifies any confusion it caused. Story 44. Not a worker, but watched a little girl not tall enough to see over the counter grab the spoon from the sprinkles and shovel the whole tub in her mouth. That was the first and only time I've ever eaten there, and the restaurant is now closed. Story 45. Don't know if this will get picked up this late, but my biggest story was at an all-you-can-eat Chinese place. A rather rotund customer arrived and wedged herself into a booth. Besides being a great get to begin with, she had the gall to request the waitstaff bring her food, since she didn't want to get up from the table and I guess to funnel food into her arteries. I was bussing tables and watching from afar, so I didn't get directly involved. What ensued with utter karma for her being a crafty person to the staff and acting like she owned the place. When she was finished eating, she could not physically get up or get out of her booth doing her being so stuffed, large in general, and wedged in. I was told by her waiter that the look in her eyes when she had to deprecatingly ask for help was priceless. The manager eventually had to call the fire department to come remove the table from the floor to get her out. All the while she continued complaining and was a terrible customer. Didn't leave a tip either because poor service or something. I didn't care too much because it's a funny memory that gets me through the week to this day. Story 46. I didn't work there, but this is my horror story. I was 13 or 14 and visited some family in Modesto. One day, my uncle and I are leaving the mall and he asks if I'm hungry. I say, yes, and he says, "You want to go here?" while motioning to some Golden Corral type place that's built into the mall. I say, okay, because I'm a teenaged, bottomless pit. We walk around the stations, get our plates full, and sit down to eat. We are eating for maybe 5 minutes when we both hear a loud commotion. Not sure what the sound is. We look up at each other and then around the dining area, both confused as to what we are hearing, where it is coming from, and then we both see it. Across the dining room, a morbidly obese man is sitting at a long table by himself. The alarming sound we were hearing was his loud, guttural retching. That's when I see the most violent spray of vomit I've ever witnessed. There was so much. It must have been a solid 6 or 7 heap. And he wasn't even slumped over. He was such a big person that as the vomit was spraying out of his mouth, only his head was getting back and forth. He was trying to cover his mouth with his hand, but it looked like it had the same affect as when you hold your thumb over the end of a water hose. The spray easily covered his table, covered his plates, and then was spilling over the edges onto the floor. Near the end of the heaves, there was less pressure, so it was just oozing out of his mouth and onto his chin, chest, belly, and thighs. He doesn't move. He sits in it. Some employees who didn't look like they were much older than me run over and take inventory of the damage. They are asking him if he is okay. They are apologizing. They are taking his vomit-covered plates away. They are wiping the table off with wet rags. One of them brings a bucket and mop over. He uses some of the rags to clean himself up. The people who were sitting near him have already gotten up and left in obvious disgust. My uncle and I cannot look away. The employees leave. He doesn't move. He sits there. I go back to eating my food because I'm a hungry teenager. A few minutes later, while I'm eating, my uncle gets my attention and motions for me to look back at the man's table. We both watch him stand up, grab his walker, walk back over to a station, and start to serve himself more food. He went back to his table, sat down, and continued to eat. It was incredible. I grabbed myself a soft serve cone on the way out. Story 47. Not a worker. Sorry, but the Golden Corral in the city where I went to college got shut down thanks to an employee. He found it odd that they made a busboy sign a non-disclosure form to work there. He found out it was because they were breaking just about every health and safety rule. They were serving meat that had gone green. They would leave food out overnight. The freezer once broke down for 3 days. And they kept serving from it, despite it being in the danger zone. He wore a hidden camera and gave the news the footage. It made me so glad I never ate there. Story 48. I'm not a worker, that being said. I was at a KFC in Bartonville, Illinois. They have a small buffet with the essentials of KFC. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, biscuits, coleslaw, and a few other things I'm sure no one has ever touched. I've already sat down to eat, watching this older lady, about 60, walk up to the buffet. If you know anything about this area, 309, you know the quality of people we are dealing with. This older lady walks up, grabs a piece of chicken in the very back part of the buffet. Without a bra, her right nipple falls out. Now her shirt wasn't exactly what I would call age-appropriate, but her nipple is hanging out of the bottom. I cannot stop staring. She doesn't wipe it off. I wasn't even sure if she knew what happened. Her right nipple drags through the mashed potatoes. I have to investigate. I have to see what the damage was. There is a valley dug by this areola, nipple combo. I had to leave. Story 49. Local Chinese buffet was shut down after multiple reports and picture evidence of roaches around the food and in the restaurant. We don't typically have roaches in Alaska. Story 50. I once worked in bar where they catered events in a number of ways, one of which was an all-you-can-eat buffet. During one of my shifts, and christening reception was in full swing. We had knowledge already that some of the guests would be late, so we were told to progress the food to the buffet tables slowly. We put out several sausage roll platters, sandwich trays, and cake plates, finger food for those already there. The event started at 12 o'clock. At 14 o'clock, in walk who I'm going to call Mr. Creosote and Creosote Jr. The wife, mother was already there, and from outward appearances, Mr. and Jr. didn't look like the sort that had barrels for stomachs. By then, the event room was packed, so we began putting out more of the hot food. I was working drinks from the bar and so had a good view of both the event room and the main bar room. While cleaning glasses, I see Creosotes, Mr. and Jr. piling their plates. Pizza slices, cream buns, cheese and onion sandwiches, spines from the pineapple hedgehog, all of it in a heap on a cardboard plate. Then they disappear. His happened several times. For at least half the times I saw them, they both had a plate each. Then I look up and they're sharing a plate. Finally, only Creosote Jr. is walking back from the tables. Now, Creosote Jr. wasn't the only kid there, but he was the oldest. For a while, 2 5-year-old boys were running through the bar and into the beer garden and back. As they're running through, the boy in front is running, shaking his arms above his head in a frenzy as he runs. Meanwhile, Creosote Jr. is now slowly creeping his way up the table, a far cry from his happy strides from earlier. He's just finished piling his next plate of food when it happens. In run the 5-year-olds, who make a beeline for the tables. Creosote Jr. is slightly away from the table. Boy 1, arms swinging, flies around Creosote Jr. and, as he does so, slams a fist the size of a cricket ball into Creosote Jr.'s junk. It all happened slowly. The boys ran out of the room unaware. The leaning tower of pizza and cheese of Creosote's plate topples over as his hands move to his junk. He drops to his knees. Mrs. Creosote comes over to him, checking if he's okay as he screams in agony. Creosote Jr. gets this look on his face. He quickly gets up, hand over his mouth, and runs for the main bar room. Stumbling, he hits the bar and a loud burp erupts from him, yet his hand still holds his mouth tight. He can't see the sign for the bathroom. He rushes back to the bar, and I, sensing it's nearly geyser time, point to the far corner of the room. Too late. A torrent of pineapple chunks, melted cheese, various colored liquids, and bread pieces come flying out of his mouth, splashing across the bar. The patrons at the bar scattered. I jump back. It went everywhere. He drops to the floor, a mixture tears and vomit stains. His mother rushes out. I rush out with a towel, and I help him get up before they both go to the bathroom. We had to open the other end of the bar while we cleaned up the vomit. I don't work there anymore, but the smell is still there almost a year later. Story 51. My first job in high school was Cece's Pizza. We were constantly dealing with gross things, people sticking gum to tables, walking and wearing swimsuits, dripping wet with no shoes on. This one, we finally told the people they had to stop doing it, and even just some of the practices were disgusting. There's a reason I will never eat G-tomatoes at a restaurant ever again. But the worst was this family that would come in at least once a week. They were all very obese, except for the husband, who was super scrawny and looked perpetually exhausted. The woman was missing a bunch of teeth, wore 1970s-style glasses, and they all smelled slightly like urine. She would ride in on her scooter and pay for her dinner with vouchers and then make request after request. They never ate off of the buffet, which means that every pizza they ordered was sent to their table directly. I don't know if they still do this or not. And everyone was wrong. I legitimately have no idea whether the son was developmentally delayed or just socially awkward, but it felt like he and the mom worked as a team. One pizza would come out, they'd eat about half of it, and then realize something was wrong. No problem, we'll make another. No, they wanted something different, a zesty pepperoni with mushroom. Oh, these mushrooms are canned. I wanted fresh, also after eating half. So in goes another order only to be wrong. The whole time the woman starts berating whoever is tasked with delivering the pizza or whoever she can wave over to their table because none of them get up. They even do this to get people to refill their drinks. As this is all going on, the son is getting more and more upset because his pizzas, that he still ate most of, are wrong and starts getting loud, gets up and starts pacing back and forth, etc. It eventually escalates to a point where we offer to remake after 2, 3 pizzas, and the woman is yelling about how we keep messing it up. Why would she want to come back here to eat? We just can't seem to get it right. Maybe it's that Mexican we have in the back making the pizzas. If he knew English, maybe he'd know how to do it right, blah, 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 until the manager rushes out and gives them vouchers for a free meal on us, and they, okay, well, maybe we'll be back, but I just don't know. And then a week. Maybe 2 weeks later, here they come rolling back in. I was so relieved when I left for college and I could kiss that job goodbye. Story 52. When I was 16, I was a busboy at one. This morbidly obese family, 4 people, 2 parents, 2 teenagers, all gigantic, came in after the noon hour when it was slow and were taking full advantage of the all-you-can-eat buffet. On my way to bussing tables, I walk by the bathrooms and see the teenaged son walk out of the men's room with a huge crap-eating grin on his round, prepubescent face. I immediately thought this can't be good and went to go check on the restroom, as one of our responsibilities was to make sure that the restrooms were generally clean. This guy had explosive diarrhea and had not even managed to hit the toilet. There was crap all over the toilet tank, the walls, and, no lie, it looked like a hand grenade of crap went off in the stall. Bar. None the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in a bathroom. I thought about cleaning it up, but instead I went to tell my manager. He was a pretty hard driving guy, but he took one look at it, locked the stall, and told me, "Yeah, you don't get paid enough to clean this up. We'll get the janitor to take of this tonight." Story 53. A family friend was once at a Golden Corral and took his young son to the men's room. While he was in there, he heard 2 people having sex in one of the stalls. He took his son back to the table, and then went back to the bathroom to confront the 2 people for being so inappropriate at a family restaurant. Well, out walks 2 men, the restaurant manager and one of his employees. He filed a complaint with corporate, but I don't know what the outcome was. Story 54. Not a worker, but I was in China for a vacation at a new buffet. I made the mistake going week 1, but my relatives were dying to go. There was a lobster station that served fresh steamed lobster. Anytime a new tray came out, people would swarm it. Before they made a rule about how many you can have, people just grabbed as many as they could. This one table had about 2 dozen lobsters on their table for about 6 people. Some guy at the table would constantly bring back more and more. And eventually people got pissed because it was just sitting there not being eaten, at least not yet. So a few people got in the group's face and started taking their lobsters. Within 3 minutes, a full-on fight breaks out. People are swinging hard and lobsters are flying over the place. Story 55. My friend from college is an epidemiologist and has worked for various Midwestern state health departments. She told me in no uncertain terms to never eat at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Worst offenders in terms of serving up old, bad food, Golden Corral, Sizzler, and Shakey's Pizza. Story 56. The family was at a fairly high-end brunch. My husband was waiting for the chafing dish to be filled with Eggs Benedict. When it came, the person in front of him put 2 on her plate and ate a third, standing over the dish, dripping into it. You can't wait. You're an adult. Story 57. We have this huge buffet with a separate dessert buffet that is presented with fireworks and dry ice and people walking around the restaurant with bells every weekend night. This one time, we had a hotel guest that kind of resembled Jabba the Hutt in size. She had a walker and used it to sit on if she was tired of walking. Now, I usually assume these people just have a disease or disorder which causes them to not be able to lose any weight. This woman was different. She started with 4 eggs, munched down 2 plates of fries, ate 3 steaks, 6 pancakes, and downed 7 Cokes with that. Yes, I counted. I couldn't keep track of it all, but it was at least 8 plates of food. She then proceeded to wait for the dessert to be set up. It usually starts at 7, and we use Do Not Cross tape as a fun prop. She was there sitting on her walker at 6:45. Once the fireworks and ice was removed, she went all in. This woman was taking full cakes to her table, dipping everything in our chocolate fountain and literally pushing kids out of her way to get to some sweets first. I saw her just grabbing stuff with her bare hands, we have these tong thingies for everything, and putting her hands in the fountain. It made me physically sick to watch, man. Story 58. I'll try to keep this short, not a worker. But I went to Old Country Buffet often when I was younger, at least 2 times a month. Well, I saw a guy dump the juices from a steak section into his cup, puts the container down, then proceeds to sip out of his cup all the way back to his table. Story 59. Honestly, I worked in a decent buffet in Michigan, and I never had a bad incident. Looking back, it's honestly surprising. However, my horror story would be that my naive young self dipped my hand in our washing machine's water tank. Didn't realize how hot it would be. In less than a second, my skin burned. I was wearing heat-resistant gloves, so I got out of it with a 2nd-degree burn. Story 60. I have a non-food related buffet story. Not as a buffet worker, but a customer. I was a kid dining with the family after church, as per usual. Well, my dad goes to grab a plate from one of the plate warmers, and he suddenly threw the plate in the air, and it landed onto the glass overhang over the food, shattering the glass all into the food. Apparently, the plate warmer somehow had busted and had superheated the plate. My dad got 2nd-degree burns on his fingertips, but 6 of us ate for free, which was nice because we were pretty poor at the time. The restaurant was so worried about getting sued. They offered vouchers and things, but my dad was a really stand-up guy and basically said, "No worries, nobody's fault, it's all good." Also, once I saw a lady go to the salad bar and grab a bowl full of vanilla pudding. I watched her at all while I thought to myself that I, too, would live some pudding. I went to serve some, but up close its texture was off. I tasted a little bit. It was whipped butter. The lady ate a bowl full of butter. It was a little sweet, but clearly butter. Yuck. Story 61. We had a breakfast and lunch buffet every day. We had one regular who would come in, take a bowl. Bowls were for grits and oatmeal at a set price. Regular food went in a box and was priced by weight. Put his breakfast food, potatoes, eggs, biscuits, and cover it with a thin layer of grits. After a few days of watching him do this, I confronted him at the register and told the cashier to weigh his cup and charge him that. He was not very stoked, but he had realized he had been found out. The very next morning, he came in and made a beeline for the coffee, not out of the ordinary for 7 a.m., and he grabbed a box. I thought I had struck a chord with him and he learned a lesson. Ducking. Nope. He dumps his whole ass cup of coffee in the fresh off the grill pan of scrambled eggs. Somehow he convinced the store manager that it was just an accident. About a week goes by before he makes his return. I see him grab a 12 ounces cup and start squeezing honey into it like it was cool. I walked right over and grabbed that cup out of his hand and walked it into my manager's office and told him to see who done it. He was subsequently banned from the store, trespassed by the police, and had his co-op ownership fees returned. He ran into me and my girlfriend at a local restaurant on the 4th of July. As he was walking in, I look up and we make eye contact, and I kind of loudly said, "Yo, that's the ducking banana head with the coffee." He turned around, got in his car, and left. Duck that guy and duck that job. Story 62. Watched a man at the Ponderosa walk up to the buffet without a plate, untuck his t-shirt, pull the hem up to form a basket, reach into the steam tray of chicken wings with his bare hand, and just load up on hot wings in his makeshift shirt bucket. The woman in the kitchen was like, "Please, sir, could you use a plate? Or just tongs?" Guy scoffed and looked at her like she'd asked him to don a tuxedo. Story 63. Witnessed an obese family pull out empty 2 liters and refilling them with the pop from their glasses. Fat kid in suspenders. He will never stand a chance. Story 64. I worked at a buffet for about 4 years, so I feel like this is my time to shine. The buffet I worked at had a chocolate fountain, and half of my time on the clock was spent trying to keep customers from sticking their fingers and other non-food items into the fountain. I distinctly remember one woman with a cast on her arm who came up and started to dip some strawberries into the fountain. Next thing I know, she manages to stick most of her cast under the fountain so that the thing is basically coated with chocolate, instead of trying to alert a staff member so the fountain could be closed down, sanitized, etc. She proceeded to casually walk back to her table and eat her dessert. I can't even keep track of the number of times we had to close down the chocolate fountain to replace the chocolate that had been contaminated because some idiot thought it would be funny to stick their hand or face into it. This place was also the only establishment that I have ever had to work where the carpets were professionally deep cleaned almost weekly because people would gorge themselves and then vomit on the floors. We also had many customers who would basically crap on walls of the stall rather than in the toilet, so the bathrooms were almost always a nightmare to clean. Many people paid other employees to clean up vomit and other bodily fluids if they didn't have the stomach for it. Story 65. Not a worker, but this guy I knew a few years back was accused of abused, but he had a solid alibi. He was on camera at a buffet eating for 9.5 hours. Story 66. Obligatory, not a worker, but I've always had issues with public bathroom. With that being the case, I'm picky about where I dine out. Several years ago, my parents were visiting, and they really wanted to go to a buffet that they had heard about. Since it was only about 20 minutes away, I figured it was worth a chance. We go through a few rounds, and I feel it. The gurgling, the rumbling. Everyone at the table can see my discomfort. They know what's going on. They ask if we need to leave. I tell them I'll be fine. This was bad. I got up to go to the restroom. My nightmare. I walk in the door and over to the stall. I open the door, and there's a hole in the wall into the next stall, like it was cut to install one of those giant TP dispensers. Through that hole was a man in a pink shirt on the next throne who looked over and smiled at me. Nope. .mpg, I waddled back to the car and left my parents and fiancé there and drove home. I paid for their Uber. Story 67. I used to work all-you-can-eat crab night at a place where a 600-pound Elvis impersonator used to come in with an entourage that would crack the crab legs for him so he could grab fistful of crab meat, dip his hands in bowls of butter, and stuff his face as fast as possible from the moment we started selling crab until we ran out of crab or closed for the day. He was very polite and tipped me very well, but it was horrifying to watch. Story 68. Never worked at one, but I had a rather glutinous roommate my freshman year in college. Mongolian BBQ offered all you can eat. I never got it because it was way too much food. You get these bowls and fill it with whatever the duck you want and they cook it for you. My roommate was asked to leave because he was eating and drinking too. Me and another friend were just in awe. I've never seen someone eat so much so quickly, but as soon as we got to the parking lot, he puked everywhere. Story 69. We were at a buffet place in the UK, and Misa, who is quite skinny and small, was looking at the dessert section when an impatient, larger guy just came, grabbed him by the shoulders, and physically moved him out of the way. Not horrifying, but just rude. so was put off the rest of the meal and we ended up leaving. Story 70. Worked in a Red Lobster during the all-you-can-eat shrimp bonanza. It was always horrible, because the managers sucked and ensured each new dish would take 15 minutes to come out. So people got tired and left, keeping their food costs down. This meant you'd have tables there for 2 hours with the same bill, and tip you worse since they're cheap and things took too long. Had 3 very large guys come in around 3 p.m. and start going to town. Plate after plate of fried shrimp. It was insane. They gorged themselves on biscuits dipped in ranch or blue cheese as they waited for the shrimp. Around 7 p.m., one got up to go to the bathroom. Around 7:20, the ambulance came since he had a heart attack in the bathroom. Also, just in general, the people who think Red Lobster is classy aren't classy people. Story 71. Friend and I walk into a buffet that serves pizza, fried chicken, and other southern staples. This one huge lady was sitting at one of those large round tables by herself. The table was covered in empty plates, at least 5 or 6 plates. He and I finish eating and start walking past the lady who is at the buffet again, when she yells across the room to the manager standing by the door, "Where's the ducking chicken?" We are all kind of in shock that she would say that with families around, but he yells back, "You ate it all!" People started to bust out laughing as we exited. Story 72. I was at a Chinese buffet with my family a few months back. This big dude was across from us at a booth with his mom, and he was probably middle-aged or older. Green hair, tank top. You can imagine his smell. I look over and see him with his half-full glass of fountain pop, something orange, think Fanta, and he proceeds to take the soy sauce bottle and start pouring it into the pop. And not just a drizzle, which would have been odd enough, but he fills up the rest of that cup and stirs it up with his chopstick. What I thought may have just a weird way to waste the restaurant's resources before leaving turned out to be his next meal. He sat there and drank that whole damn thing. It was the weirdest thing I ever saw. In a buffet. Story 73. As someone who is constantly in and out of kitchens for work, I can assure you that all-you-can-eat buffets are the absolute worst. Also, if it's questionable from the outside, you're probably right. Story 74. In a former job, I used to deliver ice cream products, soft serve, cones, etc., and many of our customers were Chinese buffets. The kitchens were across the board quite horrifying. It was not uncommon to see raw chicken being broken apart on the floor. Many cooks smoked cigarettes in the kitchen at the shadier ones. Just the smell alone was the most horrifying to me. I had to walk product into the coolers, and that was the absolute worst smell-wise. I also learned that the labor was more or less slave labor. They would start at the buffets and be lucky to graduate up to a salon, females, or other owner establishment. It's the same old story of we will take you to the US and you just work till you pay us back, which of course never works out as promised. A van load of these poor people arrived every morning and they would walk out like zombies. I have never eaten in a Chinese buffet since. Story 75. Not an employee, but I do have a horror story. I was about 10 or 11 and I was with my family at a Cece's Pizza. The story should stop there. And I noticed a lady about 40 in front of me putting ranch on her pizza. But not like some ranch on her pizza. She poured ranch until a pool formed around her plate and her 2 slices of Chessy pizza were drowning. I took note, but it wasn't really my right to judge her for what she's eating. So I just continued to get my food. Oh boy, was I wrong. I kept an eye on her as she walked over to her seat. She sat down and took the first slice and licked all of the ranch off. Then she put that slice down and picked up the second slice and licked the ranch off again. Then she takes her plate with 2 untouched pieces of pizza, throws them away, and just leaves. I've never been the same.